Welcome back to the MLS Net Boys show. My name is Chase. I'm here with my good friend Jacob. How are we doing today, buddy?
It's a great day. It's Sunday. Summer's over.
We've been sitting here for about 2 hours trying to figure out how to record this episode since Isaac isn't here today.
Producer Isaac called into work last second, so we're running it just like the good old days. Just me and Chase, but
Hey, one of these days will be big enough that he'll have a work phone for us, and we'll call him with emergencies.
how do I plug in my headphones again?
Which knob turns up the volume?
No, it makes us realize there's some work that goes into a podcast, you know. It might not sound like it from the other end based on listening to this show, but it takes some blood, sweat, and tears.
That's a good point. There's a lot of work that goes into this, even though it may not seem like it for the people who have to listen.
We got to do you know how like when you're in school they have like those like teacher appreciation or like Janet, like, you know, like for different positions in the school they kind of highlight people.
Yeah.
We got to do producer
Podcast
appreciation week,
small podcast producer appreciation week,
and then just like roll back all the times Isaac's been on the mics, him snoring in the background, just the different highlights,
the audio of him like
stuff.
dropping his his keys and stuff. That'd be awesome. We got to get him a mic. Season 2, mic up producer Isaac.
The more we talk about it, the more excited I am for season 2. It's gonna be big things.
We're gonna say all this, and then season 2 is gonna come, and it'll be like
exactly the same.
the exact same, except Isaac like won't want to be here half the time.
Just less audio production.
We're gonna be the only podcast to get worse as time goes along. Anyways, short week in MLS. Not very many games to go over, and there's still one game that hasn't been played yet that will be played in about 2 hours or so. About an hour, actually.
Yeah, international break happening right now, and hopefully one of the last times during actual league play, because, yeah, most teams get the week off, but a select few got the nod to play. So
can we real quick, you mentioned international break, can we just discuss the USA? I want to hear your thoughts on it. I know this is not the USA Net Boys podcast, but what's your thoughts on that game?
You know, I'd be lying if I say I knew too much about it, because I saw the score, I saw who scored, I saw the highlights, but I didn't really watch the game, so I don't really want to give a take. I heard that the play was not very inspired, which, like I said, I'm not sure, but
not exactly what you want to see after Greg Berhalter gets his first game back in charge. Yeah, they won 3-0. 2 goals after the 90th minute, though. So, USA versus Uzbekistan. Powerhouse.
big club.
Big club or big nation?
They're a club to me. They're the Rapids of Asia, apparently.
But definitely seems like a game the U.S. should have dominated. Pretty solid lineup when you look at the guys who are out there. Just poor performance, though. Not what you want to see, unfortunately, even though it was 3-0.
Yeah, and maybe the play wasn't inspiring. I don't think this is anything too serious to, you know, pump the brakes on, because this is a friendly. This is coming out of a busy summer with a lot of games. Let's let Greg have a couple more games before we call for his head again.
Sack him right now.
That would be the dumbest thing.
Get Gio Savarese in there.
Gio,
Man is elite in tournament competitions. He would be so good for a World Cup.
he'd probably win the World Cup his first try, or at least get to the final and lose.
That would be honestly an amazing shout. A guy who's deeply embedded in U.S. soccer history, like within like MLS and like the league. He would be an amazing shout for the U.S. job, honestly.
See, I'm a big Gio guy. I was very sad when he got sacked, but I wouldn't want him as coach of the Natties. I can see him going to like a smaller CONCACAF nation.
I think he would be an amazing international coach. His style of play, like, and how he gets teams fired up for big matches, just like that grittiness and like getting his teams to like really just fight for each other. I would love to see him take that U.S. job,
I would love to see him at like a
like a Curacao.
no, not that small, like a Costa Rica, Jamaica. I mean, they're bigger teams for CONCACAF. Even Canada, I think, would be interesting. But John Herdman, Canada coach. This is MLS related, actually. He left the Canada job to go to Toronto FC. That's a big move for Toronto, but a big blow for the Canadian program.
That shows just how bad of a spot the Canadian national team program is right now. The fact that they lost probably their best coach they've had for the men's national team, left to go to the worst team in MLS.
Yeah, well, but the appeal with Toronto, I can see. I would, if I was in his position, 9 times out of 10, I would jump for that job, except for the fact that he would be a World Cup hosting nation in 2026. That's a big step down, in my opinion.
I agree, but I think he kind of sees the writing on the wall with the fact that Canada doesn't seem to be like a sustainable project. The fact that they aren't dumping very much money into their national team programs. I don't think they're going to continue to build on the success they had of being that top team in CONCACAF last year, going into the World Cup. It's kind of a wake-up call for them. They lost all 3 games, and then afterwards he said, yeah, it was a great experience. I don't know.
Yes and no, because I see it 2 ways. I see they did get there, and if I remember the Belgium game that they lost 1-0, they played excellent, and I think Davies missed a penalty.
Yeah.
So they proved they can compete, and I think this experience will be valuable for them, for the younger players. You know who I would love to see have a shout with Canada?
Caleb Porter?
No, actually, but I think he would do all right. Wilfred Nancy, I'm sure, is going to get some interest. Took Montreal, was a local, kind of product of the Montreal system, was pretty successful with them. Very good team he developed, and, good style of play. Now in Columbus, same thing. I would be very surprised if he doesn't get a ring from Canada.
I agree. However, I think he has the ability to reach far higher heights than the Canadian national team. I think he could find a club team that probably would be better than the entire nation of Canada.
I don't doubt that, but like I said, the allure of coaching as a host nation, one of the host nation teams in a World Cup, I think would be very hard, very, very hard to ignore.
Except for, you got to think, do I want to be the head coach of a home nation that's about to lose 3 home group stage games and then get knocked out?
See, I don't.
That's just almost embarrassing, and it could set you back further in your career as a coach. It's kind of like with the U.S. job. There was a lot of these names that were put forward as who wouldn't want to take this job, all these big profile names, and now it's kind of coming out that a lot of these coaches weren't even interested in the U.S. job. So I think a lot of big name coaches aren't really that drawn to the fact that it's a home World Cup.
See, I agree and disagree. I agree that you're right with that point, but I don't think Wilfred Nancy's a big name head coach, at least in.
Well, for Canada, I mean, that's the equivalent of U.S. being linked with Roberto Martinez. That's the equivalent, if with how successful and big the U.S. is versus how small and unsuccessful Canada is.
And you're right. However, this is also going to be the first expanded World Cup, so there will be much worse teams getting into the competition. Let's be honest. Anyway.
That's true. I just don't like Canadian soccer. I really don't. And I don't think they're going to do well in the next World Cup either.
This guy's a hater.
Anyways, let's move on to what this show's really about. And that is international break MLS soccer.
This is for the real MLS sickos. We kind of mentioned before. We'll go over some games. DC United versus San Jose Earthquakes. 0-0 draw at Audi Field in DC.
DC has not been good recently, other than their win against Chicago. They're 4-0, where they kind of changed things up a little bit. They were on two like rough losses. They lost to New York Red Bulls, lost to Philadelphia. Obviously lost to Philadelphia in the Leagues Cup before that. Lost to Pumas before that. So definitely not like in a very good run of form. Just the fact that they beat up on like a pretty poor Chicago team.
You know what's really concerning is their ninth place, last playoff spot in the East. 28 games played, 34 points. You know who's breathing down on their necks at this point? And obviously right below them, Chicago, Charlotte, New York City, Red Bulls. But Inter Miami, only 6 points away from DC United. They would be the team leaping them out of any of these. And they have 2 games in hand. So if they win both those games, which they probably will.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's kind of a good segue if we want to move on to the Inter Miami versus Sporting Kansas City game. This was one of our predictions games, and neither of us predicted Inter Miami pulling out a 3-2 win. Kind of surprising, honestly. I mean, we had talked about it. You, I think, said that SKC was going to win. I predicted a draw. Not very many people were high on this Miami team, missing, I think it was 10 players to international duty, one of them being Lionel Messi, who scored a banger of a free kick for Argentina.
Really against those Burger League workers? Oh, wait. That was an MLS.
The McDonald's goalkeeper. But no, Miami still had a good, kind of spine of their team. I think that's what I talked about in the last episode, where they still had Sergio Busquets, still had Jordi Alba, Facundo Farias. They still had Kamal Miller back there anchoring their back line. Solid team still, and I think it shows just how dangerous this team is going to be going into this next year. The fact they have all these role players around those 10 international players that are huge game changers for them.
Yeah, and for me, this game could have gone either way, honestly. I don't know if you saw the goal that... Because Kansas City was up at first, and then Miami came back, went up 3-1. Kansas City gets one back, but that third goal where Sergio Busquets does a quick restart, completely catches Kansas City asleep. They're complaining to the ref. Like, those little momentary lapses that seems Miami is getting from these teams, I'm not going to say it's luck, but I think the right team can capitalize on it. We've seen Nashville get really close twice, but an interesting thing I saw brought up was Leo Campagna probably won't stay with Miami next year. They'll probably go for a big name. Griezmann's been linked. Suarez has been linked. I can see a lot of suitors looking at Campagna, and he's just like putting his stock out there pretty much. And he scores a brace.
Where do you think he goes if he stays in MLS?
I would love to see a team like a Vancouver, somebody who could use a big striking piece, who's like a...
Other than Brian White and Ryan Gauld?
I can see Ryan Gauld more play. He's more of a playmaker and like feeding him. I would love to see a team like that.
See, that's true. That's what we've kind of thought of Ryan Gauld in the past, but he's looked his best this season when they just throw him up there as like a part of like a 2-striker system, and he doesn't have to worry about defending at all.
And I'm a big Brian White fan. I don't think he's like that, like the starter for a cup winning team. So Vancouver would be cool. I can see like a Seattle going for him if because Rui Diaz kind of seems like he's cooling down. That'd be a big move for them. Honestly, Portland, I'll just throw all the Cascadia teams in there. That would be a good move. LA Galaxy, especially if Chicharito kind of either retires or he's had that long-term injury. I think that'd be a great move for them.
What about...
Don't say Colorado. Were you gonna say them?
How did you know I was about to throw out a Colorado Rapids right there?
I would love if they did, but it sounds crazy because it's not even that ambitious of a move, but it doesn't feel like a...
Yeah, I agree. I think a Timbers probably wouldn't look at a guy within the league like that. No chance. Seattle, definitely, I could see like picking him up and him proving Miami wrong, like proving that he's like a solid piece that could be really dangerous in this league. Can't think of any other teams off the top of my head that could use a striker of his profile, because he's kind of a unique guy. Like, he's pretty tall, but still like pretty clean with his footwork. So kind of fills a handful of roles that you'd want out of a striker.
you said Colorado jokingly. There's no way they'd go for him. They would go for a Miami, kind of falling down of the order, pecking order forward. They would do like Robbie Robinson, and that would be like their big signing. Would be Robbie Robinson.
This is funny. So, a little bit of backstory to this. Earlier this week, I've been sending Jacob. I send him just random MLS news whenever I see it, and I'd sent him the fact that Luis Diaz was waived from the Columbus Crew roster, and I was pretty bummed because I said this guy's been solid for me in my FM save, and he just sends back, this is going to be Colorado's big news pickup, and then not even a day later, I open up Instagram and I just see news like Colorado has signed Luis Diaz after being waived from Columbus Crew.
It's uncanny how many MLS, not even rejects, but these kind of leftover pieces they pick up. And I'm not going to take full credit because I saw comments saying Rapids are looking at this profile of a speedy winger player, and then I saw the Columbus waving him. I was like, oh, this has got to be related.
But it's so funny because we were talking about Columbus just a couple weeks ago, and Colorado, and we were saying how they try and do what Nashville or St. Louis does, where they pick up these depth pieces from other teams, but they never do it well. They always get bad depth pieces, and I think that's the same thing with Luis Diaz. I think it's just a fast guy, no end product. You know who he reminds me of? We named an award after this player.
Was it the Darren Maddox Award? Or
yeah, Darren Maddox or Emmanuel Boateng.
There is that certain profile of these electric wingers, but can't put the ball in the net or get an assist, like Asprilla, when he first started.
Yeah.
Speaking of Colorado, we also were wrong on this because we went hard on Colorado last week. We're gonna do it again because some news actually came out from the Rapids that Robin Fraser, head coach since 2019, midway through, has been let go. And I don't know if you read the letter from the club president, I think it was the president of footballing operations. He didn't lay into Robin Fraser, but he was pretty critical of him, I would say. What's your take?
I have a hard time because I like Robin Fraser. I like his philosophy. I like, just kind of how he talks about soccer. He just seems like a likable guy who has a good head on his shoulders. But, when you think about it, he hasn't really been set up for success at any of the teams he's been at. Like Chivas USA, not really set up for success there. Colorado Rapids, not set up for success there at all. But I don't know, man. I didn't see what the owner had said about him. But I don't know. He's kind of part of that weird era of MLS players and coaches who kind of came through together. I know he's coached with Greg Vanney and guys like that. I think he was around Connor Casey as well.
That's a pull right there.
That's a deep pull. But just, I don't know. He's never been in a good position to be able to be successful. So I think he would be, but also I don't think I would necessarily want him at the Timbers. I don't think I'd want him at my club because he hasn't proven to be good at developing players. When you think about when he took over that Colorado team, I don't know much about the Chivas team he was at, but none of their core pieces got better. When you think about the team that they've had and the pieces they've kept, none of them have gotten better. It's just gotten worse. And part of that's from no investment in the team, but also if you put a guy like a Wilfred Nancy or even a Gio Savarese, somebody there that could get the most out of core pieces, I think they would have shown a lot better these past couple of years.
I agree. And this letter is going to say, this is from their president here, and I'll read you a little bit of it. This is from Padraig Smith is his name, and he highlights the 2021 playoff appearance and first place in the West team, and he just thanks Robin Fraser for his dedication to the club. But then he goes on to say, we've also experienced some untenable lows that have culminated in our current reality. A team that's last in the league, scored the fewest goals, lost another Rocky Mountain Cup, and is on the verge of missing out on the playoffs. Once more, it's simply unacceptable. It's unacceptable for the type of club we want to be. but more crucially, it's unacceptable because this is a team that's capable of much, much more. Do you agree? Because it sounds like he's kind of calling him out, to me at least.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like that, but he seems a little delusional if he thinks this team is capable of much, much more. When you look at just some of the other teams, like I could think of 5 teams just rapid fire that all are just way better squads than Colorado.
Yeah, for me, Colorado's ceiling, like looking at the roster as now, is like a team that makes the playoffs. I don't even see them in the top half of the playoff team.
They're like the Luton Town of the MLS. Like they're in the league, but they're not well equipped enough to even put in like a top half finish.
Because I think like that 2021 team, not the best team in the league. They probably overshot their weight a little bit, but they were a good team, well organized, a lot of good pieces. But who nuked that team? I don't think Robin Fraser would, just blow up that team. It had to have been for the financial aspect or just trying to get some cheaper options, make some profits on certain players. I don't see.
But sorry to interrupt you.
I just don't see how this team that they have right now is a team that would be competing for anything.
I would agree, but you got to look at like core pieces that got worse under Robin Fraser. Like Lawless Abubakar got worse. Cole Bassett got worse. Just looking down their roster right now, I'm trying to think of people who were there right around the time he took over.
Diego Rubio
got worse. Jack Price has been there for a while. I wouldn't say he got worse. He's just been injured. But you just kind of look at like their roster. They don't have anybody, kind of going back to what you were saying, they don't have anybody that screams like playoff caliber player. Like I don't see a single name on this list other than Jack Price that could be like a solid player that would help a team that's in a playoff spot right now.
For me, those ones you mentioned, Abubakar, Price, Rubio, I think those are good players, but they've just been set up to fail. I don't think you build the team around those guys, but I think they would be great in a better setup, in a more cohesive unit. I think they could prosper, but those aren't the guys that are going to win you a trophy. Like they performed admirably. I remember Abubakar and Austin Trusty's center back partnership in 2021, lights out, maybe the best in the league. Yet they got rid of it. So I don't know. I see your point. Like those guys aren't going to be the guys who you build around, but I think they're good players. I don't know if I would say they regressed. Maybe they have, but I wouldn't blame that on Frazier personally. I think that's more.
I think it's a mixture. I think he was set up for failure, but he didn't make the most out of the situation he had. I'm looking at the roster that he had when he originally took over, and he did lose like some key pieces like Kellen Acosta, Tim Howard, of course. You got Clint Irwin as your backup back then.
Legend.
He had a Kai Kamara. Obviously, he still has Jack Price, but guys like Keegan Rosenberry have gotten worse. Like I said, Lawless Abubakar. Just guys, nobody got better underneath him. It's unfortunate. But as a Timbers fan, I would not take Robin Fraser at our club.
Yeah, and a lot of people have been floating the name around. I can see the intrigue because, you always hear he's like a well-respected name, but have we seen anything like the fruit of those well-respected comments, of those like comments where a lot of people give him praise? I'm not saying people should trash the guy, but I feel like we've yet to see it other than one random year where they were pretty dang good. Unfortunately, I think the path for him would be like going to USL and,
You don't
working
think
out.
he wants to go be an assistant coach at Miami?
That seems like the popular gig, but I think somewhere maybe a little lower, style of football where he can develop himself into a winner, then he gets a shot in the league.
I would agree. He's been successful as an assistant coach. As an assistant coach, he's helped teams win MLS Cup, Supporter Shields, Eastern Conference, Canadian Championship. Runners up in the 2018 CONCACAF Champions League. What team was that for? Off the top of your head, how do you know?
Toronto.
Yep. But as a head coach across his career, across 202 games, he has a 31% win percentage.
That's not great.
That's pretty poor. With a negative 54 goal difference.
Real quick, you got one coach to come into Colorado, turn this thing around, give the fans something to cheer about. Who do you pick?
Any coach in the world?
Realistic pick.
I was about to say Jose Mourinho.
That would be so weird.
That would just blow this league up. A realistic pick, I don't know, because it just seems like their FO is not backing this team at all. It seems like they need to clean house completely and just restart. I know we weren't super impressed with him this season, but Gio, I think, could turn that team around. I don't think he would go there. Bob Bradley, I think he still has something to prove in this league after kind of blowing up with Toronto, and I think he's a coach that if you give him money and you allow him to bring people in, don't just stick him with random European, just old Italian dudes. I think if you give him money and allow him to build a team, he can be really successful.
I would like to see Bradley because I think he could use the challenge. LAFC, he was constructing a great team and they were successful. We saw with Chicago Fire, he coached the U.S. national team. He's had good patches, and I'd love to see Colorado give him a role kind of he had like how Bruce Arena was sporting director and coach, and just give him
talk
the
about
keys.
Him as well.
That was my segue. Give him the keys to the franchise and see what he can do, because he would be able to pull some players, from past experiences. But New England Revolution draws Minnesota United in Minnesota 1-1, and literally at the end of this game, they drop a bomb.
Bruce Arena has parted ways with the club. He resigns after an investigation.
And still, very cryptic language here. Bruce Arena was at the club since 2019, took over for Brad Friedel, and turned this team around. Under Friedel, they were a terrible team, and he brought in lots of pieces, had a good style of play, and New England's been a dangerous team for a while now. So he was sporting director and head coach. So interim head coach Kurt Analfo, one of his assistants, becomes his sporting director, or the sporting director at New England. But we don't really know what happened yet. So
yeah, for them to let him go, it must have been something pretty serious, because he's been an amazing coach for them and completely turned their franchise around. So either it was something really serious, or they think they've outgrown him and they think that they can continue the success, which honestly I don't know if they can. I don't know if New England Revolution is the club to continue to be successful without a Bruce Arena controlling everything.
It seemed like such the perfect fit, and I'm really disappointed. I know a lot of New England fans are confused, disappointed, thinking, where do we go from here? Because we don't really know what happened. The rumor I saw was toxic workplace environment was created by Bruce Arena. That was what I saw floated around. We don't know if it's... we just don't know.
I don't know. I'm looking at his coaching career, though. So across his career, let's just compare him to Robin Fraser real quick. He's got a 49% win percentage across his whole career, and that's dating from 1996 until now. His best stints were with the U.S. national team and DC United, both at a 55% win percentage. Both stints with the U.S. are actually a 55% win percentage, which is kind of crazy.
That is crazy. I think either way, no matter why he was let go, it's a sad reality that this era will most likely come to an end, because once again, New England not able to get over that hump.
I'm curious who they'll bring in next. Do you think they give Bob Bradley a call, bring in the old guard, or do you think they go a different direction and try and get in a young coach like a Wilfred Nancy?
I think a younger coach. I wouldn't surprise me if they go foreign. Honestly, Arena, in terms of domestic coaches, kind of ticks all the boxes. He's successful. They play well. He was good at sporting director too. I just don't see a better option in the domestic pool. We didn't even talk about the game too. It's funny. They went to Minnesota, and it was a 1-1 draw. And Minnesota early on conceded to New England. Carlos Gil with a nice goal, and then like the last kick of the game, Dane St. Clair, Minnesota goalkeeper, gives an assist to Franco Frampagne and scores.
That's MLS, baby.
That's 2 blown leads in stoppage time in back-to-back weeks where they were in a winning position, gave up 4 points. They would have been at 52 points, 5 games off of Cincinnati, with all this nonsense going on in the background.
Yeah, it seems like their club's just in some disarray right now. Not quite where they would want to be, of course, but obviously I think they're looking more at the future. I think they're probably feeling solid going into the playoffs this year. I don't know what their plan is exactly, but they must have been kind of in a similar spot as the Timbers. Like, better to just dump him now and like start planning for next year.
Which is interesting to me. First off, that was a prediction game for us. We were both wrong. Me and Chase both opted for Minnesota wins. It was a draw, obviously. But unlike Gio, I mean, Arena was doing well. You know, This was a good team.
Yeah, like I said earlier, though, I think it's either he must have done something really terrible, or they felt like they were at a point as a club that they could do better than him. Which I obviously disagree with, but I think they must have been at a point where they're just like, we're already kind of wrapped up playoffs this year. As long as we just don't bomb out of the rest of the season, we might as well move on and start like focusing towards next year, and then hope that we can pull something off in playoffs.
It's a good discourse about some original MLS squads. That was a big point for Minnesota to pick up at home because, like we mentioned, and we're going to talk about them soon, a lot of teams just creeping up right behind them. So Minnesota, 37 points, but few spots below, the Portland Timbers hosted LAFC, and this was a huge game for Portland because they needed 3 points. A lot of these games are being called must-wins. Portland wins 2-0 at home versus LAFC.
Nobody expected this. Nobody expected this to happen at all. The 2 goal scorers as well. Luis Mabiala with like a goal just on, like that was just the ball's dangling on the goal line. He just heads it in, and then Claudio Bravo scoring like a pretty nice team play, build up like slotted finish from him. No, it's just I'm at like a loss. Like I don't know what to think of the Timbers anymore, dude. Just like didn't expect them to win this game at all. I thought LAFC was going to come out just like mad about losing to Miami in a game that they were right there in. And then they come out and just Timbers kind of do the Timbers thing. And when their backs are against the wall, they always seem to produce results.
Interesting because, yeah, some absences due to international duty. I think most notably Dennis Bouanga. But you're right. LAFC should have came out of the gates flying. They were playing pretty well, I would say, in this game. A lot of possession at points, which comes with being, LAFC. But they had some good chances. Carlos Vela missed open header in the box. Bogusz, open header in the box, misses. And all sorts of just blown opportunities. I don't know if, the goal, McCarthy just completely misses the ball.
Open corner kick and then it's just dangling right on the goal line. It's weird.
And just all these mistakes. But I want to focus on Portland because we're fans and we don't care about anybody else. But
real quick, last thing about LAFC. I've seen a lot of people talking lately like one of the big downfalls for LAFC is not signing a better goalkeeper going into the season. Like John McCarthy had some like outstanding heroics in the MLS Cup final. But a lot of people are saying they shouldn't have gone into the season like having him as their starting goalkeeper.
And what's funny is now Maxime Crepeau is healthy. He's just on the bench. Mm-hmm. He just hasn't won the spot back. But, I mean...
He might after this game.
He definitely might because he was kind of like the missing piece, it felt like, for LAFC last year. They finally got like a really good goalkeeper, solid in the league, and now he's on the bench, and their regular goalkeeper's punching balls and missing them.
Anyways, let's move on. What were you about to say about the Timbers?
I mean, all sorts of weird stuff happened this game. Larice Mabiala, how about him? The guy we always complain about.
I saw somebody tweeted. They said, like, I hope this is like the final swan song for Mabiala. Like, let him go out on a high after like all the criticism he's faced. He's been like a solid center back over his tenure with the Timbers. Just let him score this goal to like push us towards playoffs and never play for the Timbers again.
And I think it's interesting because on the ball, he still had those shaky he almost blew a couple like weird possession things where he had the ball and he just like mishit it, or like the ball slipped out of his touch. But Portland, unlike when Gio was coach, when they got the lead, and especially when they got the second goal, they didn't just park the bus. They went for like the kill. They were playing up tight, like high tempo. Like they had a lot of chances to make this a 3-0 game. And so Mabiala wasn't just constantly under pressure the entire time and they were just waiting for him to make a mistake. He had a pretty good game, actually, like in terms of clearances and tackles. He was really good, actually. And what do you think about that? Because
it kind of proves a point that I've been saying for a while, that, and I've kind of been thinking about, like, Timbers defenders have always been viewed as like not like elite defenders in this league. I mean, to be fair, there are no like amazing center backs in the league, but I think Timbers center backs have always gotten such a bad rap due to like Gio's play style. Like when we go up, we just sit back and absorb pressure, and then you get Mabiala moments where he's cleared 7 out of the last crosses, and then the 8th one like goes off his shin, like between his legs for like an easy tap in at the back post. But when you play like a more attacking style and you stay like trying to create pressure further up the field so you don't like just absorb all these chances, like our center backs tend to look a little bit better. He's not the most mobile against counterattacks, so you can't really afford to let that happen. But it makes sense why he looks better when you play this type of style.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, he had Zach McGraw next to him. Zuparic was out on yellow card, and 2 very slow center backs, honestly. And
yeah,
they looked solid against LAFC, a very quick team. There's an interesting quote because a lot of the like post game was actually talking about Liam Ridgewell's like defensive coaching, and I think McGraw said Ridgewell spent like 30 plus minutes their last training session just practicing corners as defenders. And Mabiala had a little quote where he was saying that with Coach Miles Joseph and Ridgewell, like a lot of things that were sliding before in training, like things that were being led sled, like haven't been happening. So it seems like there's some weird inferences that maybe Gio, I don't know, you tell me.
I don't know. I mean, it's those things that when they talked about Gio's job and the life cycle of it, when things kind of get towards the end of the life cycle, things get overlooked. Maybe they've focused on corners or, those small pieces of the game like in previous years or earlier in the season, and then it just kind of gets overlooked because they feel like they need to focus more on other things, or they're focusing more on rest, or it's just those things that when you've been at a place for so long and you've built so much, it's really easy to like not think about the small details. But no, I love hearing that. I love the fact that I really hope Liam Ridgewell sticks with the club with whoever the next appointment is, because I think he has like the ability to develop into a head coach himself.
Yeah, the quote here was Mabiala said, over the last 2 seasons, we've been letting a lot of things slide. And he was asked about the coach's like training and defensive, and then Zach McGraw was asked to like expand upon that, and he pretty much echoed the same thing. So I agree. Ridgewell seems like, I mean, he's such a vocal leader. Like when he was a player, when he was a commentator, I think it'd be great, because what the commentators were saying was now that Gio's gone, like Ridgewell has become straight away like the number 2 like on that coaching staff. And I mean, defensively, it makes sense. I mean, it seems a lot cleaner.
Do you think Ridgewell throws his hat in the ring for the opportunity at the head coaching job?
I think if anybody, it would be Miles Joseph who gets it. But I think, honestly, that would completely depend on if they make playoffs. If they make playoffs, I think there's a chance it happens. If they don't, I think they look elsewhere.
Yeah, I would agree. I honestly wouldn't be upset with like a Liam Ridgewell appointment, but I do think keeping him like on the coaching staff for as long as possible and letting him develop would be awesome. But he's a guy that I could see being a really good head coach in the future, and I wouldn't want to lose him to another MLS club or let him go back overseas because it'd be a lot harder to get him back over here. It'd be like a Steven Gerrard, how he was being like groomed for like that Liverpool job, and then just his career went down the drain, unfortunately.
I'm here for the Stevie G, Liam Ridgewell
Comparisons.
profile comparisons. That's it, except for LA Galaxy and
Which
St.
kicks
Louis.
off in 15 minutes. But yeah, that's all the games that actually occurred this week. So we were gonna just hop right back in where we left off last week, discussing the Ring of Honor. We've done 2/3 of the league already, worked our way from the West Coast down through the South, and we're gonna wrap it up.
Just
going through the
35
East.
more teams to go in MLS.
Next week, we're going to go through USL. We're going to start with USL Ring of Honor, and then we'll work our way down there to Division I college soccer.
Love it.
Would be kind of fun to, like, one of these episodes go through, like, best college soccer, like, best, like, MLS players that came from, like, the draft.
Weirdly, I was thinking the same thing, actually.
Season 1.5 in the off season.
The off season. The lost episodes, we'll call it.
The Forgotten Files. Anyways, we're going to just kick right into this.
It's a big club.
We're starting with a big club that was impossible to find any players really that aren't retired already.
That haven't been retired for 15 years.
But I ended up pulling a name of a guy that was absolutely lethal when he played in this league, and his name is Nemanja Nikolic.
Really good striker. I was going to say those years Chicago was good, but they made the playoffs a whopping one time, I think, in the last 12 seasons. But Chicago Fire went out and got Schweinsteiger, Dax McCarty, a lot of good pieces, and then they added Nemanja Nikolic, and he was lights out. I think he won the Golden Boot, I think his first season in Chicago.
Yeah, he had 24 goals, 3 assists his first season in 34 games. I think across his whole time, he has like 50, I want to say like 50, I have it right here, 51 goals and 96 appearances. So across his time in MLS, he was scoring about a goal every other game, a little bit more than that. But that's really impressive for a guy that spent 3 seasons on a crappy team in MLS.
Really, really impressive. Came from Legia Warsaw. Same team Yaro Niezgoda came from, I want to point out.
Kind of sad for him. He the 3 years before he came to Chicago, so he won the league with Legia Warsaw in 2017, won the league with them in 2016. In 2015, he won the Hungarian Premier League with Videoton. And then he won 3 leagues in a row and then went to Chicago. Poor guy.
Good shout there. The only thing I would knock him for is, he was only there for 3 seasons, which is a long time. But there's other players. They're just from a forgotten era of MLS. Frank Klopas, Peter Novak, Chris Armas, Ante Razov, few OG.
Frank Klopas is a solid shout, especially since he was just like Chicago through and through, stuck around in the coaching staff for a long time, and then was pretty unfortunate with his recent run as head coach. But what can you do? That's MLS, baby. Next up, we got Cincinnati FC.
Darren Maddox. Just kidding. Lucho Acosta.
Kakuta Mane. Oh, sorry.
They just get all those random.
Well, when they were bad, yeah, they were signing players like they're the Colorado Rapids, dude.
Man, that's just, I feel for any Colorado fans who just the only time they get mentioned on any podcast, just they're that team that gets bagged on.
They probably love our podcast. We're probably the only podcast that talks about them,
other than just talking about relocating
other
teams,
than like Colorado Rapids fan TV or something. But anyways, back to Cincinnati. First name we got down here seems like the obvious one, Lucho Acosta. What do we got for Lucho?
I mean, he speaks for himself. I mean, he came, and this was same time that, you know, Pat Noonan took over. There was that takeover, but lights out. Probably going to be the MVP this year. You know, drag them to their first playoff appearance, and I mean, they won, I think, 1 or 2 games in the playoffs last year. He's played 78 times for Cincinnati, 25 goals, a boatload of assists, MLS All-Star, best 11 last season.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he definitely has the MVP wrapped up this year. And just the way he's like transformed that club. Like, it's not all due to him, but his play has like helped just elevate that club to a whole new level, and it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere.
Another shout. Big player.
Old Nick Hagglund. He's been with the club since 2019.
He's a local lad from Cincinnati. Part of the reason he's at Toronto, solid rotation center back through some good years there. He wanted to come home, and he went to Cincinnati and got piled on for like 3 seasons in a row. Stuck with it. Legendary player for them. This is his 5th season there now. Kind of crazy that they've even played that many seasons and been there ever since. 94 appearances.
Yeah, one of their leading MLS players in appearances, and just been like a solid anchor for them in the back, and has just kind of helped like you said, like he's a local guy, kind of helped set like the culture for the club. So I could definitely see him winning over the hearts of the Cincinnati faithful and getting his name up in the rafters. You know, you got any other shouts for Cincy before we move on?
No, I was gonna make a joke one, but I mean those are literally the only 2.
Yeah, I couldn't see any other ones. Next up, we have Cincinnati's fiercest rivals, the Columbus Crew, and this was the first guy that came to mind for me because I just watched him light the league up forever. I watched him just destroy the Timbers a couple times. Federico Higuain. Kind of weird because I remember when I first watched him, I was like, I wonder if he's related to Gonzalo Higuain. Come to find out, they're brothers. And then, the rest is history with Gonzalo coming to MLS and them reuniting in Miami. But Federico Higuain, when he was at Columbus, like in his prime, he was like right up there with like one of the best players in the league. I remember like the battles between like him and Diego Valeri when they were on the same field it was so fun to watch. That was like prime MLS.
That was Messi versus Ronaldo.
Both of those players though, like Higuain was just a magician with the ball, had a really similar effect on Columbus as like some of these other guys like a Lucho Acosta or like we said a Diego Valeri. Just absolutely lights out for them. And he stuck with them for a long time. He played there from 2012 until 2019. So definitely one of their longest tenured players. 55 goals, 49 assists, and just shy of 200 games.
That's kind of depressing. He left the year before they won MLS Cup in
That
Columbus.
is sad. And he went to DC, who finished 24th.
I forgot he went to DC, then he went to Miami.
Yeah. So that's a rough one for him, but doesn't take away the fact that he was just an absolute legend for them.
I got a couple other shouts here. Couple you didn't actually put on here. So I'll go over these real quick. You can cover the other 2 because Columbus, a lot of good candidates, I'd say.
It's a tough one to go with because they have such a long history.
Brian McBride, former USA striker, 161 appearances, 62 goals. Pretty solid for them. Was on Columbus when MLS began as a league and played there till 2003. Obviously went on to Fulham. He had to take a step down. He couldn't handle the pressure. But a lot of goals, a lot of time played there. Guillermo Barroseletto, former LA Galaxy manager like 2 years ago, and Boca Juniors manager, but probably the first big Argentine like playmaker, attacker to come to MLS and be super successful. Came in 2007 before, which was unheard of at this point. Came from Boca Juniors, 118 appearances, 38 goals, won them 2008 MLS Cup, sorry. So the trophy.
Yeah, obviously the guys you named are like just legends of the league, not just Columbus. Those are some solid players. I was kind of looking at some other names that were a little bit more recent. One I won't talk about too much because I dislike him is Chad Marshall. Chad Marshall, just probably one of the all-time great like MLS center backs. Held it down for Columbus Crew from 2004 until 2013, before going to Seattle. Honestly, could have been on Seattle's Ring of Honor. Helped them, win Supporter Shield and then win 2 MLS Cups, as well as winning 2 Supporter Shields and an MLS Cup with Columbus. So just a solid guy, like 253 appearances for Columbus. So he was there for a long time. Definitely put his footprint in the club. But another guy that just kind of has been floating around the league, but just his time at Columbus was fun to watch, is Justin Meram. Justin Meram was just a solid guy that was pretty exciting back in his day and then just had a steep fall off. Like a really just steep fall off.
He had a nuts finesse shot, dude. I remember. But yeah, he that whole team that era, Higuain, Kai Kamara, Justin Meram, Will Trapp, that was an exciting team.
Yeah, Justin Meram, his best season with Columbus was 2017, right before he left for Orlando. He had 13 goals, 5 assists in 34 games played. So never put up like super amazing numbers, but was just like a really important like role player for them and like progressing the ball, and
could always get you like 5 to 15 goal contributions.
Yeah, he was always a solid player that held it down for them. And then even after his stint with Orlando, he went back to Columbus for a couple more years. So he ended up playing a total of 9 seasons for Columbus. I want to say he has like close to 200 appearances, which would put him up there as like one of their all-time most appearances.
He's at Charlotte now?
He's currently at Charlotte, yeah. He's got a... Oh gosh, let me see if I can pull his stats real quick. 3 goals, 4 assists currently.
Last I remembered, yeah, he scored a brace at Atlanta, his former team, and a lot of people there felt like he had a good stint at Atlanta. But
yeah, he played at Atlanta 1 season in 2019, and then he was with RSL from 2020 until part of the way through this year, and then he went to Charlotte. But yeah, guy just kind of floated around the league a little bit, but
hung out with Kai Kamara too much in Columbus apparently.
Made the most of his time in Columbus. Next up, though, another historic club. Not as much, but definitely a dynasty club. We got Toronto FC, and there's some obvious names here.
Clint Irwin comes to mind.
There's some obvious names here, but there's one guy I really want to focus on that I think deserves it above the others, and that's Jonathan Osorio.
When we were talking about Russell Tybert the other week, he's like literally the exact same, but he's actually really good. Osorio.
Yeah, Jonathan Osorio is a lights-out player. I think he's at the tail end of his career now. He's 31, but he's only played for Toronto. Started his career 2013. It's now currently 2023, still playing. He's got 14 games, 14 starts this season. So just a solid lights-out player for them. Was, part of that like crucial team that won the league, and that 3 years of dominance they had. Just a solid player that is still making a difference, and I think I can't see him going anywhere, but with how MLS works, I could just a weird like 1 season trade to like an expansion team or something I could see happening.
Right. He was out of contract. I want to say it was last year, and it was big because it was the World Cup had just ended. It was the off season in MLS. I think he was rumored with. Oh man, I think it was Olympiacos, big Greek club, but he ended up turning it down to stay at Toronto. Like you said, he'll probably stick around there. It's going to be shades of Mark Noble at West Ham when Jonathan Osorio retires.
It's gonna be a sad day.
How about a couple others on the obvious ones?
There's some obvious ones, and I'll throw all of them out there, and we can kind of discuss them as we please. But obviously, Michael Bradley, obviously Sebastian Giovinco, and Josie Altidore as well. But out of those three, how would you list them? Like in list of importance, like 1, 2, and 3. Who would be the top one?
Shoot,
putting you on the spot here.
Oh man. In terms of longevity, I'd go Giovinco, Bradley, Josie. And that's no discredit to Josie. I just think, and especially Bradley too, was a huge piece, but I feel like they could have found an equivalent complementary piece, whereas nobody could replace Giovinco. That guy was ridiculous in the league.
And that's been proven since he's left. Like they tried going back to Italy and bringing in 2 people to like do the job that one Giovinco did, and it hasn't worked out for them. But that guy could be argued that he was the original player that started the Saudi Arabian League revolution. He's the reason why Ronaldo went there. He called up old Seba Giovinco and was like, "Hey man, how's this league?"
That's hilarious. Once again, MLS starting these new frontiers in world football,
pioneering the way for a lot of players around the world. But yeah, I would agree. Giovinco probably the most important player for them in their recent history. Man was lights out. He played a total of 114 games, scored 68 goals, assisted 40. So
Ridiculous.
Nearly had a goal contribution every single game. But not too much else to be said on that. I think most people who are listening to this podcast probably know about Giovinco and like the legacy that he has left behind in Toronto. Moving on to a historic club that for whatever reason was really hard to find a player. I think it'll be similar to Columbus. There's probably a lot of old players that you could pick that I just kind of glossed over. I was trying to look for some more recent players, and I went with the clear and obvious answer that everybody would choose if they were looking at a DC United. Who is it, Jacob?
Rodney Wallace. It's back-to-back weeks. Just kidding. DC United, as of now, Steve Birnbaum. Been kicking in at DC for a long time.
Steven Birnbaum has been at DC for quite a while. I mean, he's been there since 2014, and he's just been a solid defender. He's never played less than 20 matches, except for in 2020, which I think he was injured. But just solid center back that's just anchored them for a long time. I mean, it's kind of hard to like just continue to talk about these like players that aren't like truly amazing players, but just a solid MLS player that has held it down for years on end.
Yeah, and kind of like we said, we try to go a little bit more modern, so most fans at least, would recognize, obviously, if you're a fan of DC, Eddie Pope, legendary center back, had the game-winning goal, MLS Cup, the first one. Ben Olsen, 221 appearances for DC, coached for a long time as a player, won 2 MLS Cups, the original CONCACAF Champions League, the Champions Cup, an Open Cup, 3 Supporter Shield, retired in 2009, became head coach in 2010, a year after he retired, and then was head coach there for 10 years. So he was within that organization a very long time.
Another shout, Jaime Moreno, played with DC he only had one stint where he left in 2003 and played with the Metro Stars, but other than that, with DC from 1996 until 2010, won 4 MLS Cups with them, won the league twice, the Supporter Shield, 329 matches played with them, scoring 131 goals and 59 assists. So
Legendary.
absolutely legendary status, not only for DC United, but just legendary MLS player.
Him and Marco Echeverri, same category. He was there not quite as long, very long time, won a ton of trophies. More recent one, I'd throw Bill Hamid up there. Homegrown player from the area, started in 2009, went on loan once for a little bit, but played there until 2022. So about almost 300 appearances for the club, about 280. So
Wow.
long time.
It's kind of interesting when you really try and think about that number of like 280 games is a lot of games to play. When you think about a season's only about 30, 34 games, that means a player has been loyal, and not very many players even get to 280 games across their whole career.
Interesting about this is kind of irrelevant, but Bill Hamid, played for the national team a few times here and there, made a competitive appearance in the Gold Cup. Apparently, he was on the bench for Sierra Leone for a few matches against some other African nations last year. Didn't play for them, but was on the bench. How does that work?
I believe you're allowed to file like a one-time switch. So he may have filed his one-time switch, because that's kind of like how the whole Diego Costa,
That's right.
switching from Brazil to Spain. Anyways, moving on, we have the Philadelphia Union. Only one name it can be, David Accam.
Did you watch him on the Nike Academy?
No, I did not. I absolutely did not, but I should have put him down for Chicago Fire. That's where he really made his name. But I think the clear guy for recent history for Philadelphia Union has to be Alejandro Bedoya, though. Came back from, I believe he was at Nantes in France.
Yep.
Came back and kind of helped turn this club around, and has just been a solid MLS player since. And they look like a way better team when he's on the field, despite him being an old man.
No, you're right. Yeah, legendary player, captain, the real soul of the club. Because, to be honest, if you're an MLS fan now, if you were only a fan of the league maybe the last 5 years or so, Philadelphia's been really good. They were never a great team before this. I think they won their first playoff game only in 2018 or 19. So this success and all is fairly recent for them. That's probably the best name on that list. However, Sebastian Letou deserves a shout, I think. Kind of reminds me of Kenny Cooper, actually. Weirdly enough, they kind of look similar. And Kenny Cooper, they had some similar stops. Sebastian Letou played for Seattle, Philly, Vancouver, New York Red Bulls, Philly again, the Rapids, and then DC. But Sebastian Letou, almost 200 appearances, about 50 goals, was there in their expansion seasons. I just figured this out. Philadelphia has a Ring of Honor, actually, and he's in it.
Makes sense. Another name we got, Jack Elliott. He's been with Philadelphia since 2017. Only time he's been away from them is when he went to their USL affiliate, the Bethlehem Steel. He was there for a couple years. It's kind of deceiving because he only played one match with them in 2017, one match with them in 2018. So other than that, he's been with Philly since 2017, and is, like we were just talking about, they weren't necessarily a good team back then, but he's been there through the thick and thin. And then 2019, when they really started to turn their luck around, they've been a really solid team. He's been at the heart of that. Like, him and Jacob Glesnes have been part of the reason why they're so successful. They haven't had to worry about a center back pairing or worry about how they can stop goals when they have two amazing center backs, and then they have Andre Blake behind them, who honestly kind of leads me into another one. Andre Blake is in for a shout of Ring of Honor. That guy has been just arguably one of the best MLS goalkeepers of all time, and I think he could go down in that argument of a Nick Raimondo. Who else did you put up there? Would you throw in a Luis Robles or a Connor Casey? Or I mean Casey Keller.
I think either of those. I think Robles for his longevity. Keller, I know, came to Seattle and he was really good, but wasn't there a ton.
I just remember the old sweatpants.
Sweatpants Keller.
Sweatpants Keller.
Moving on to another club that has a lot of options. New York Red Bulls. You left one gaping hole on this list, I must say.
I put down one guy who probably is the clear and obvious shout that we don't even have to talk about. Thierry Henry. Obvious answer that just was lights out for their club, an amazing player. I threw down Tyler Adams as well. Didn't play for them for very long, but I think at the end of his career, people will look back and be like, that was probably the best product of New York Red Bulls, like their best outgoing player ever. I threw down Gio Savarese. Back when they were still called the Metro Stars, their inaugural season, Gio Savarese scored the first 8 goals this club ever scored. All were Gio Savarese, one of which was a bicycle kick, and he also scored a hat trick.
Ridiculous. No business.
He was a huge fan favorite as well. I was kind of reading about it a little bit earlier today. He got about 96 appearances before he left. A lot of those weren't starts. A lot of them came as substitutions, which make his 50 plus goals even more impressive because it was in way more limited minutes. And then when he got sold or traded off to New England Revolution, a lot of fans were really upset with the organization for letting a huge fan favorite go. I also put down Mike Grella just as a joke. Who do you got?
I got Clint Mathis, legendary early 2000s and national team player. Played about 4 seasons at the Red Bulls. Luis Robles, like you said. But the big one is BWP, Bradley Wright Phillips.
That's a huge one. I don't know why I didn't even think of him.
The Apple TV man himself.
For whatever reason, that didn't even cross my mind. That's so weird.
I forgot about him too. Danny Royer was good for them as well, kind of in that era. Mike Petke played there for a long time. I think BWP for me though would be because he just missed that first Shield in 2013. He came in 2013. I'm not sure. I think he did actually. So he was there for a few Shields, deep playoff runs, deep Champions League runs. I think Dax McCarty would deserve a shout as well. Mm-hmm. Kind of took over post Thierry Henry era as captain, and we talked about him before, but still feeling the effects of Dax McCarty in Nashville.
Yeah, so BWP was there in 2013, so he won 3 supporter shields with New York Red Bulls. Just could never do the business in the playoffs. But still, amazing player that kind of goes down as a league legend as well. Across his time in MLS, he scored 117 goals and 234 appearances. So definitely a guy that deserves some respect, and I'm kind of upset that I forgot about him, honestly. Another guy that's on the broadcast with him on Apple TV, Sasha. I can never say his last name. Kljestan. Another guy that was just lights out for New York Red Bulls when they were putting together those shield winning teams.
It's a great shout. Yeah, lot of historic, good players at the Red Bulls. Cross the river. Crossing that Hudson River Derby.
I don't want to talk about this club for very long.
We don't have to. There's not much here. Well, there kind of is.
Short history for the new kids on the block. Buy your shiny toy, rich club, Citigroup FC.
Next year's going to be their 10th year in the league.
That's crazy to think about. That's so weird. But New York City FC, obvious answer, has got to be David Villa. The only one of the 3, they brought in Frank Lampard, Andrea Pirlo, David Villa. David Villa was the only one that cared. Those other 2 did not give a crap about what was going on at that club.
100%. And they missed the playoffs their first season, but then David Villa was legendary for them. Scored so many goals, cared. He was the captain. Wanted to be there. Paid attention to the league before he even got there. He would always talk about it. And like I remember when they signed him like a year before they started, he went on loan to Australia just to like stay fit, and he wanted to like come be a part of the city, be a part of the fans, and what a legend. My only regret with him, I wouldn't even say regret, but like they won the cup after he had been gone, and it had been like 3 seasons after he had left, but shows how they kind of ushered out after that kind of era of the European stars and progressed to building a more complete team.
I would agree. And a piece of that more complete team is another shout is Maxi Morales.
Just unfortunately out for the season last week. Tore his ACL, I think, at 36.
Which is a bummer because he had left to go play in Argentina, and then they got him back.
Like that was like his 3rd game or something.
Yeah, he played. Yeah, he'd just gotten back, and then got injured. But obviously, huge important piece for them. He'd been there since 2017 until this year, of course. Has 166 games for them, 76 goal and assists combined. So, been a productive player for them. He's been the heartbeat of their team. They don't look the same without him. Another guy though that has kind of helped anchor their team that just left actually was Sean Johnson, goalkeeper that honestly could have been on Chicago Fire's Ring of Honor as well. Another guy that we overlooked, just like David Accam. But he played more games with NYCFC by just marginally. He played 176 games with Chicago Fire, 179 with New York City FC. Obviously huge for them in that cup winning year against the Timbers. Just an important piece for them that they haven't looked as good this season without him.
I think 2 other shouts. Maxime Chanot and Alexander Collins, the center back pairing they had in that cup run.
Yeah.
Collins was there for 6 years. Chanot just left, and he was there for 7, almost 8 years. So legendary players, especially since they won that MLS Cup. Collins, though, I specifically gets a shout out because he got the game-winning penalty in like the Eastern Conference semifinals against New England in that Shield winning team, and then also won the MLS Cup winning penalty. So
I would agree with that.
I gotta pause this real quick. This computer's about to die.
Oh crap!
Just noticed.
Do you want my charger? Does it work for that?
Oh, is it just HP?
Yeah. See if that works.
Woo! That was scary, dude. I just looked and it just said you might want to plug in your PC, and there was nothing on that battery icon. May 12th. Okay, I'll just tell Isaac about that.
Where were we at? We were just finishing up with
New York.
We could just move on to New England. All right, next up we got New England Revolution, another team that you can kind of just go back in the archives and find a lot of like old MLS players and talk about their stats and whatnot. But I'm gonna go with a guy that has been at the club for a while, a more recent player. This might help you know who he is. He's in top 10% of blocks for his position in the league.
Smells like Andrew Farrell.
Yes, sir. Andrew Farrell, the center back for New England Revolution, has been there for a decade now.
Crazy.
Yeah, he's put up every single season. He's put up nearly 30 games. Was a part of that Shield winning team. What can you say? Just a New England player. Like when you talk about Andrew Farrell, that's all you can talk about is the fact that he's been at New England forever. Kind of just goes under the radar, even though he's been a solid player. And I want to almost liken him to like a Lalas Abubakar, like at Colorado, like a guy that could anchor a team to be really good, and he stuck around when they're really bad, and then saw it through to the other end and was a part of a really important, really important part of a really good team.
Yeah, I personally love to see players who just dedicate their career to a single club, and yeah, I think was it 2013 he started his career? So he was there in 2014 when they got to MLS Cup and lost to the Galaxy. So started off, successful team, and stuck with them through the not as great seasons.
Stuck with them after 2014. They never finished higher than 11th place until 2021 when they won the Shield. So he stuck with them through some tough times where he probably could have pushed for a move to any other team in the league. I think most other teams would have taken him, like a proven MLS center back that has a high ceiling, but he stuck with the club.
Can play on the right as well as a right back. I remember he started as a rookie as a right back.
That's true.
Great. You love to see Andrew. We got to get that guy on the show.
Could happen. It could happen. Another shout. We don't have to talk about him very long. I'm not the biggest fan of this guy just for his takes on the league, but Taylor Twellman, I think he's their all-time leading goal scorer, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, legendary player. It kind of goes without being said. Taylor Twellman. I want to say he spent like almost his whole or most of his career at the Revs, but almost his whole career. Played in Germany for a bit. 174 appearances, 101 goals. That's pretty good stats-wise. Retired early due to concussion worries. But, yeah, I mean, legendary player. Won the Open Cup 2007. And, made a few MLS Cups. Didn't get over that hump, unfortunately, but good player.
Yeah, I mean, another guy that you could kind of throw in there as well that's part of the broadcast team now is Charlie Davies. Solid player for New England for a long time. Still a part of their broadcast team, I think. I don't know if he still is after the Apple TV deal. But I'm going to go for a more recent player. I'm going to say Gustavo Bo.
The legend, cruising down. Cruising around the cities in his cars. You love to see it. For me,
such a random poll. Did not expect that.
You want to give some context?
There was a year that Jacob and I and some buddies went up to Seattle to go watch Timbers game, and there's always some shenanigans going on as we're just cruising around, walking around the city before the game. And I don't know where we were at exactly. We were pretty close to the stadium, but some guy
somewhat downtown, yeah.
Some guy in like a Lamborghini or like some just exotic sports car. You just hear it like on the other side of the block, like brap, 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 like engine revving, and then he just comes flying down the street past us, and everybody like looks over, and then I'm standing next to Jacob, and I just kind of quietly just like go, dude, that was Gustavo Bo.
I don't even know why. There's nothing in his personal life that I've seen that's indicated he would be anywhere near that type of activity.
There's no reason why he would have been in Seattle. There's no reason why he would be driving that car. Just for whatever reason, that was the first MLS player that came to mind. I was like, if I say an MLS player, it'll make Jacob laugh, and that was the first guy that came to mind. So now it's like an ongoing joke whenever we're in Seattle.
That was like down a hill too, down the really hilly part of Seattle. Just this car comes flying. That's kind of like that's like a huge just sphere of me and Chase's relationship. It's just random situations that have no context and just saying, dude, was that insert MLS player?
It's kind of like you see those memes like on Instagram where it's like men's like friendships can literally revolve around just saying old sports like athletes' names, and that's like a big thing of like what Jacob and I do is just say old MLS players.
It's funny because we can just talk like that and I'll genuinely laugh and have a good time.
Yeah. Some of my best laughs come from us just like bringing up an obscure old MLS player. Anyways, Gustavo Bo, he's been with New England since 2019. And since then, he's racked up 95 appearances, and he's scored 42 goals and 16 assists. So it kind of speaks for himself. More than a goal contribution like every other game.
I put him and Carlos Gil kind of in like a similar category together. Kind of like a package deal. Carlos Gil, 2019 as well, joined. 122 appearances, 28 goals. Led them to the Shield. Individual accolades in MLS, he's got like a lot actually for only being here for 4 years. Newcomer of the Year in 2019, Best 11 2019 and 2021. The Best 11 is pretty impressive because he came like mid-season too, if I recall. MLS Player of the Month. He won the Revs Player of the Year twice, MLS Comeback Player of the Year once, MVP once, and twice in the MLS All-Star game. Solid.
Yeah, absolutely a legend that I think is going to go down as like one of the league greats. But that leads us to the very last team, last but definitely not least, the Montreal Impact. Oh, sorry, they have rebranded. Club de Foot Montreal.
This doesn't even deserve anything purely based on how terrible that rebrand is.
Yeah, I hate that. A team that was kind of hard to like seriously find some players, you know? Like find some guys. I ended up coming up with like a longer list than most, but none of them are like, when you think about them in terms of like MLS success, that are like super successful.
Yeah, so in MLS, they've won 4 Canadian championships, and that's it. You know, no real deep playoff runs. They got to the semifinals that one year against Toronto and that lights out year.
So in MLS, the best thing they've done is beat 2 other Canadian teams 4 times across the season. It's like 4 times throughout their whole history they've been better than 2 other Canadian teams.
Yeah, and you know that gets them into the Champions League, which is no sleeper of a competition. I think most notably in MLS, I think of that 2016 playoff series where they were a game away from the MLS Cup, but then the 2015 CONCACAF Champions League had an improbable run to the CONCACAF Champions League final, won or tied the first leg at Club America in the Azteca, which was crazy, and then they went up in the second leg at home against Club America, and then they just completely lost the plot and conceded 4 goals in the second half.
That's a rough one.
But anchoring that Champions League team in a couple of those Canadian Championship, Ignacio Piatti, I think, is the 100% guaranteed one, if I had to say.
Yeah, and I would say kind of similar. I talk about him the same way I talk about like Federico Higuain, like right around that same era of MLS, of like the Diego Valeris, like the Higuains. Like that was such a different era of MLS where like you had these playmakers, like these 10s that were just running the league.
The number 10s were like, ridiculous.
It was
back
like
then.
A completely different profile to what you have in the league now, but all 3 of those guys were just amazing players. When you look at Piatti, for Montreal, he had 6 seasons. He scored a boatload of goals. He scored 66 goals and had 31 assists and 135 games played. So 97 goal contributions across 135 games is pretty dang good.
Definitely, if he was on a better team, could have won some. He could have been a huge piece for a lot of those teams that were competing for silver. Where, like we think about, like you said, Valeri, Higuain. Higuain didn't win a cup, but think about like how Valeri is viewed within the league, and I would put Valeri above Piatti. But man, if Piatti had some better pieces, maybe won the Champions League, he'd be viewed a lot higher up than what he should be, because he was a legend.
He's kind of forgotten about because when you look at his time with Montreal, so he joined in 2014, they finished 19th. 2015, they finished 7th. 2016, 11th, and then 17th, 15th, and 18th. So never finished very well when he was there, but man, was he like the best player for that team while he was there.
And I was actually mistaken. He was only there for 1 Canadian championship and then got to the final of the Champions League. 3-time All-Star, 2-time Best 11, team MVP 4 years, top scorer 3 years. No better pick for Montreal.
The clear and obvious answer. Another guy you could throw in there.
Dominic Oduro.
Honestly, not a bad shout. Old pizza hair himself. But a guy who was with the club for a pretty good portion of his career, Evan Bush. Not the number 1 for the first few seasons he was there, but 2015 through 2019, he was their number 1 option. Just a solid goalkeeper that did the business. They never were that great when he was there, so he's not really viewed as fondly, but he's kind of one of those guys that is going to come up in like our Guess Who game or whatever one of these days, because just was a name that you would see every year in the league, like a Zach McMath, like a who's another, like a Tally Hall, like some of those just like
Tally Hall is a crazy shout.
some of those just deep poll MLS names. Not too much else to say about him. Another guy, a little bit more recent, Romel Kyoto. He's only been with the club since 2021, but he's been like one of their most important players in that time. He's played 75 games, 34 goals, 15 assists in that time.
Really solid, because this is kind of off topic, but like speaking of teams who kind of acquire other teams' MLS depth pieces, like he was like Houston, but never was that great. If he went to a team like Colorado, he'd be just stuck in the mud, just not really contributing. But he goes to a solid team like Montreal, and he unlocks his potential kind of. A couple shouts I got here. I kind of forgot these two played here. Marco Di Vaio, like a longtime Italian striker in Serie A, played for Valencia as well.
And Go ahead.
Played for Montreal for about 3 seasons, 34 goals in 76 appearances. And then Alessandro Nesta.
I was just about to say that. You reminded me as soon as you brought up the Italian. I was like, I forgot Nesta played there.
Just for like a year or two, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. It's talked about. They've mentioned it on Extra Time, but I've read these quotes from him before. Have you heard he's like wants to come coach in MLS? That's like one of his goals.
Is that right? Because I thought he was like CEO of like Miami, the USL team, like Miami FC. He
was at Miami, but now he currently coaches. He coached 2 different teams in Serie B in Italy, and then he coached. I think he coaches. I forget the name of them, but they've been promoted to Serie A, so he's coaching in Serie A. But both teams he coaches in Serie B like sacked him because they didn't get promoted. And he was, doing an interview, and he talked about how he wanted to go coach in MLS. He said, like, in MLS, you have the freedom, and this is something we've talked about with coaches in MLS, that you have the freedom and you have the time to actually build something, versus in Europe, there's no patience. Everything is, like, demanded right now. So there's, like, a lot more of an element of luck that goes along with it, versus in MLS, he could come here and he could help develop, like, a whole club and a vision that he wants to have. So definitely an option for some of these MLS jobs that are coming up.
This is a fascinating team because I'm forgetting all sorts of players that played here. Patrice Bernier, longtime midfielder, captain, club legend there. I remember even Thierry Henry speaking about like this guy. Laurent Simon, longtime center back, played for Belgium actually while he was at Montreal. Fascinating. They had Bojan. He wasn't a legend there, but I was just looking through their player list. They've had a lot of interesting players. Bojan, the former Barca, Ajax, and Stoke player. Bakary Sagna played there at Montreal for like a year. Victor Wanyama now.
And we picked Evan Bush instead. Another name I threw down was Didier Drogba. I forget, we were literally just talking about it before we started here, but he had an insane goal-scoring record for Montreal when he was there. He played only 2 seasons, 33 games played, and he scored 21 goals and had 4 assists. Absolutely just lit the league up when he was here. Only 2 seasons as well, so wasn't here for very long, but man, was he good when he was here.
That's a great shout. They had Jordi Mihailovic, wasn't there long, but was great while he was here. I don't know. This is a fun team. Samuel Piet played 171 times for them. Real recent anchor for their midfield.
Jack McInerney, Justin Mapp. We were just talking about Drogba. Do you remember? I forget what season it was. One of the seasons he was here, he got tied up in like that. Like he tackled the goalie and then
his legs caught him.
Threw the goalie down or something.
Was that not Steve Clark?
It may have been Steve Clark, yeah. And yeah, that was back before VAR, and they just kind of laughed it off and let it go, whereas in today's age that probably would be like a red card.
Classic MLS, just protecting the star player, am I right?
Freaking Americans. Anyways, I think that wraps up our Ring of Honor for the whole league. So
This is a dangerous topic for me and Chase because anytime we're just spitting random
names
MLS
back and
names.
forth. So now to wrap it up, we're gonna go back through the whole list, start to finish. No, we'll be here all night if we do that. That's kind of a fun segment, though. I enjoyed kind of taking a look back at some of these important players.
Strolling back through some legendary MLS names. Always a good time.
I'm sure there's definitely some people we missed as well. Just like it's funny it took us till that very last team of Montreal to like really dive in, and we found a bunch of players that we forgot even played in this league.
I think especially what intrigues me is like the European players who like come here from like notable clubs, but like play for like a season on like a random team, not like an LA or a New York.
Yeah.
And then they're just gone. You didn't even hear about them. Like all those Montreal players. But
I would agree.
it's just hard because, yeah, we don't get every player because there's 29 teams. And there's a few you can like keep up and remember with. But remembering like longtime players for all those is pretty difficult, actually.
It is. It is. But that was a fun segment. Definitely something that we may do a different iteration of in the future. But moving on as we go to wrap this up, we got our match predictions. As we talked about, the two games we both predicted on that have already happened, Minnesota versus New England, we were both wrong. Miami versus SKC, we were both wrong as well, so no points awarded there. LA Galaxy and St. Louis are currently playing. I don't know. Have you checked their score at all?
I was just looking. St. Louis up 1-0 on the road.
1-0 on
Huge
the road.
for
I
Portland
got
Timbers.
I got St. Louis winning this game 2-1. Jacob has a 2-2 tie. But moving on to this next week, we went with 5 games this week actually because as the season's wrapping up, there's so many interesting games with all these playoff implications and teams like on the verge of jumping over each other. Really exciting. So I threw down a handful of games. First game we got New York City FC hosting New York Red Bulls. What's the name of this rivalry? Isn't it like Hudson River Derby or something like that?
Yep.
Both these teams neck and neck. New York City FC 12th place, New York Red Bulls 13th place. But both are like a win or two away from getting into that playoff spot. So definitely a huge momentum turn for them. New York City FC on 30 points, New York Red Bulls on 29. New York Red Bulls have a game in hand though, so definitely have the ability to jump over New York City FC and make some ground here.
We've kind of alluded, but yeah, this rivalry's lost a lot of bite, it feels like. I mean, this is a big game. Yeah, they're close, fighting for a playoff spot. I'm going New York City at home versus the Red Bulls. I'm going NYCFC 2-0 at home. I don't see the Red Bulls getting a result away from home.
I am going for a 1-1 draw. I just don't think this is going to be much of a game. It seems like all the fight has just left this rivalry. I think the fact that they're within reach of playoffs, but the teams above them and the teams like, Miami is right below them. Every other team seems to have way more momentum than both of these teams right now. So I don't see this being much. Going for a 1-1 draw. Next up, we have Charlotte hosting DC United. This doesn't sound like much of a game, but when you look at the league table, DC United 9th place on 34 points, Charlotte 11th place on 31 points with 2 games in hand. Huge game for them. And we had talked earlier, DC not necessarily in a good run of form. And then you look at Charlotte in their run of form, I don't think they've lost a game since July 15th. Unless you can count the Leagues Cup loss to Miami, but that's just a whole different beast. But
which is crazy considering they're still 11th place.
Yeah, I mean a lot of they won a handful of games to the Leagues Cup, so but huge momentum builders. And then they come out of Leagues Cup and they've beat LAFC, or they tied Orlando and then tied Nashville. But 2 really hard teams to play against. Coming up against a DC though is going to be interesting.
Huge game because this would put them tied for 9th place, like with DC actually. I'm going. We doubted DC last week against Chicago. I'm going DC. Benteke seems to be doing well, actually. So 1-0 DC United.
I'm going for a 2-1 Charlotte. The fact that they're home I think makes a huge difference in this game, honestly.
Does Bill Tuiloma get the...
Not a chance. He doesn't get anything. But no, I think the fact that Charlotte is home and the fact that they haven't really had any poor results recently, I think it's going to be huge for them. So I'm rooting for them. 2-1 win here. Next up, we have Montreal hosting Chicago Fire. Montreal in 8th place on 35 points. Chicago in 10th place on 32 points. And same amount of games played, but Chicago has a game in hand on DC, who's just above them in 28th place. So these two games we were just talking about, very intertwined, and you can see a lot of teams shuffling right here. But I wanted to go over Chicago's recent results. So most recent game, lost 4-0 to DC. Before that, they lost to Vancouver 1-0. Before that, they lost to LA Galaxy 3-0. Before that, they lost to Orlando City 3-1. And then you go into Leagues Cup. They lost to Club America 1-0. They lost to Puebla in penalties. And then, so their last win was Leagues Cup on July 27th versus Minnesota, and it was a 3-2 game.
When was their last MLS win?
League win? July 15th against Toronto. They were on a good run of form going into Leagues Cup. They had 3 wins in a row. And then they went to Leagues Cup, and they've just been not good since then.
Terrible. Montreal hosting Chicago, the Kai Kamara derby, the Dilly Duka derby, the Jordy Mihailovic derby. Harry Ship?
Ooh,
that's a name right there.
Deep, deep pull.
I'm going 2-1 Montreal.
I'm going 3-2 Montreal. I feel like there's not going to be much defending going on in this game.
Which means
be some goals blown in.
Which means we're both saying Montreal winning. It's definitely going to be Kai Kamara getting an 85th minute header winner.
Yeah, it's going to be like a 1-0, just scrappy game that's played in the midfield the whole time. Anyways, another game with huge playoff implications is Austin FC hosting Portland Timbers. Austin FC in 10th place, 33 points. Timbers in 11th on 33 points with one more game played than Austin. So huge game for Timbers if they really have any hopes of making it into the playoffs. If they win, they have a chance of bumping up into that 9th or 8th place. Oh, it would be 9th place.
Huge. This is a 6-point game. Portland and Austin creeping right next to each other. I remember last season, it was similar. Portland went in Austin and got a win. Zach McGraw scored the winner, and it was huge. Portland in Texas in the summer months never really mix well, which is terrifying. I'm going a 2-2 draw though. I don't know if Portland wins, but I think it'll be a draw.
I'm going with a 3-2 Portland win. I think this is going to be a high-scoring week in MLS. I think some teams are finally getting a little bit of a rest. There's no midweek games, and I think the league just needs these games to be blown wide open. But
who scores?
I have a feeling it's going to be the unlikely characters again. I think Zach McGraw, off a set piece. Juan David Mosquera, I think, also is going to get a goal. Third goal, Evander, free kick or something weird like that. But no, I wanted to kind of go over Austin's recent run of form as well. They obviously tied New England 2-2 recently, September 2nd. New England, we talked about it, terrible place as a club right now. Their last win before that, July 15th against Sporting Kansas City.
Austin?
Yeah. Since then, they had that terrible showing in Leagues Cup, losing to Mazatlan and Juarez 3-1, two not good Liga MX teams. And then they come out of Leagues Cup after having nearly a month break, and they go and lose to St. Louis 6-3. And then after that, it's been a loss to Dallas 1-0, a loss to Sounders 2-1, and then a draw against New England. So it could easily be an Austin revenge game where they finally put some form together. But I think they're just down in the dumps right now, and I think Timbers are starting to build a little momentum. Last game we're going to predict, though. We have Orlando City SC hosting the Columbus Crew. Not necessarily implications of who's gonna make playoffs here, but when you look at the league table, Orlando's sitting in third place in the East with 47 points. Columbus, same amount of games played, and they're on 45 points. If Columbus wins, they could jump all the way up to second place.
Wild stuff. Yeah. Close teams. You're always really big on Columbus. I'm always really big on Orlando. This is kind of like our alter egos coming out. I'm going 1-0 Orlando. Facundo Torres is heating up. They just won in Cincinnati. I think at home versus Columbus, they get it done. You don't think so?
I'm going for a Columbus 3-0 win. I think Columbus is going to freaking blow the doors off of this place.
At Exploria Stadium
Absolutely.
in Orlando?
Absolutely. I think Columbus, having just beat Montreal 4-2, they had a rough result in Houston, but that's Houston. They're heating up. Terrible place to go play at. They've had some good results, though, beating Toronto. They also beat Cincinnati 3-0 recently. They had a pretty good showing in Leagues Cup. They've been solid before then. And Orlando as well, like building up some steam. So, I mean, they're doing pretty solid. I don't know. It's just something about this Columbus team, dude. And it's not the fact that I'm just their FM manager, but they're just a fun team to watch. And I think they have a lot of really good pieces. And Wilfred Nancy is a really good coach. I think he's going to help this team get a high finish before playoffs.
Two solid coaches. Oscar Pereira, Wilfred Nancy.
Oscar Pereira still hasn't been offered another contract at Orlando yet, I believe. I think his contract's end of the year, right?
I think you might be right. I'm not too sure. I know a lot of Orlando fans have wanted him gone, but he's really been their only successful coach. I took him to got him one U.S. Open Cup, took him to another Cup final. He's really good. I think the question is, has he already reached kind of his peak?
Yeah, so his contract is he's out of contract at the end of this year. No offer on the table as of right now. To me, he's kind of like the opposite of Robin Fraser. Like, he's been put in these clubs that were like set up for success, and he's been really good at developing like youth and developing players. Like, he was amazing at developing youth at FC Dallas, and he's been really good at like improving the stock of all these Orlando players.
Was even the whole reason he got the Dallas job was he had a good year at Colorado, of all places, in 2013, I want to say. And yeah, developed players, developed Dylan Powers, current Orange County SC legend. That's for one person out there listening, our friend Ryan.
Oscar Pereira is a guy I would love to have in Portland. Like, we're historically a terrible club. I think we're probably the worst one in the league with youth development. I would love to see him come in and like kind of turn that around, and also just the fact that he was really successful with FC Dallas. So I don't know. I would love to see him come, but I think he's probably a guy that any team in the league would take a chance on him. He's going to be having a lot of phone calls this year.
That's going to do it. Episode 29.
29. What are we doing for the 30th episode special?
Big old 30.
We got to call 30 MLS players.
Episode 29 for 29 MLS teams. How about
we highlight the best players to wear the number 30 in MLS?
That's such a niche segment. Off the top of your head, who's the best number 29 in MLS league history?
Oh, gosh. Juan David Mosquera. He wears 29, right?
I think. Yeah,
I'm pretty
sure
you're
right.
Does.
You're right.
Yeah.
Anderson Julio, RSL.
This is a deep poll question.
This is what happens when we're left.
This is what we'll be talking about for the next
30.
I was just trying to Google MLS players who wear the number 29, and the first thing I just typed in MLS players who wear, and it came up with MLS players wearing sports bras.
The amount of comments I see still every time that happens when somebody takes
like,
off a shirt.
Why are they wearing sports bras? Why do they water the turf? It's fake grass. Why are they watering it? It was to the point where at Timbers games they would have like an informational thing up like on the screen at halftime that explained why they Like
Seriously?
they were watering the turf. Yeah.
Freaking American fans, dude.
Freaking American fans. I'm looking through a list to see if I can find the best number 29 of all time. Oh, there's a clear answer here.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Tim Melia. Tim Melia, number 29 legend.
Guy haunted many Timbers players back in the day. Just those unbeatable SKC teams.
This is an interesting list. It's on MLS's website. They go through the best player for each number. They got Diego Valeri with number 8, Diego Charo with 21. Some solid. This would have been a fun segment for us to do. Maybe we do the worst player to wear each number. That would be pretty fun.
That's gonna take some research.
That would be our 100th episode. We could go up to like just number 11 or something like that, but that would be fun. Anyways, that's gonna do it before we get off on another tangent here. Episode 29 of the MLS Net Boys show. Thank you all for listening. As always, Keegan Hughes, come on the show.